Your Honor, I have the syndrome.
This syndrome is one of the most unique twists in the Silo series, a mysterious illness that adds even more danger to an already tough life in that gray post-apocalyptic bunker. People are barely getting by, and now they have this to worry about too. Ever since we saw Paul Billings struggling with it, fans have been hooked. What exactly is this syndrome? How does it start? And why was Billings hiding it until he finally came clean to Judge Meadows? While it's linked to the stress of being cooped up underground, there's more to it. The scariest part? Almost anyone in the lower levels could end up with it. So let's dive into this strange condition and how it might push the Silo storyline closer to rebellion. Before we get into it though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please do us a solid by subscribing. It's a small click for you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin.
You okay?
What is the syndrome? Meadows said that the syndrome is a natural human reaction to an unnatural situation in episode 3 of the running season. In essence, that's what it is. There's only so long people can be trapped in an underground hole before it begins causing some serious problems. We learn the first beats of a grave disorder prevalent among the Silo folks in the first season of the Apple TV series. Paul Billings, a cop who's presently having a tough time accepting his department's demotion into becoming Sims's aide, has the syndrome. This disorder is far from your average common cold. It hinders physical function, and it's because of Billings' syndrome acting up right when he was arresting Juliet that he lost hold of her and she escaped for the moment. While we get to see this incapacitating disorder from Billings' POV, Billings isn't the only one to have it. In fact, way down in Mechanical, there is a big warning signboard educating people about the syndrome and how it is not to be taken lightly. This clearly shows us that this disease has affected many people in the past and is a critical concern for the Silo authorities. If you're living in the Silo and start noticing random twitching, that's a big red flag for the syndrome. It usually kicks off with those twitches and then moves on to shaky hands and legs, sharp bursts of pain, and muscle spasms. Things really go downhill from there, your balance is thrown off, and your whole nervous system starts breaking down. The scariest part, if you don't get help early, it hits your brain next. You'll start losing focus, and eventually everything just shuts down. No wonder people in the Silo are ready to rebel. It's a ticking time bomb in their bodies. Honestly, it's stressful thinking about what's ahead for Billings. We're rooting for the guy, and this syndrome is the last thing he needs. The warning sign also prescribes clean living, which is the only way to safeguard against this crippling disorder. Now, given the syndrome's symptoms, the Silo has disallowed people suffering from it to hold public office or any service where an affected citizen is responsible for other people. This is a mandate listed in Article 5 of the Silo's rulebook called the Pact. This is where Billings' great conundrum comes in. The man has hidden his illness from everyone but his wife to continue to serve in the Silo's police. His secret was later discovered by Juliet. Unfortunately, Sims too found out about Billings' syndrome, and we all know he's never up to any good. Instead of firing and reporting Billings, Sims named him the new sheriff. But with the syndrome sword forever dangling over Billings' head, he must now live under Sims's thumb. This is how Sims had planned on indirectly controlling the police, even before he got the direct orders to do so most recently in Season 2. The syndrome really has made a hot stew of poor Billings' life. By the way, there was another guy with a bit of character in the series that had this condition. Remember Charles Martin? He was a scruffy man in the episode titled The Janitor's Boy. Martin was a suspect in Deputy Sam Marnes' murder, and Juliet questioned him about it. She figured he had no hand in it considering he was ailing with syndrome and let him off the hook. But how do people end up with this illness? Let's check out what really causes this illness. Theories about the syndrome. We really love the show's creativity in introducing the syndrome. There's no precedent in the books for it, no written word on it at all. The show took some artistic license and built an additional challenge to intensify the plight of the people in the Silo. In fact, this is the one thing the TV series Silo has been able to do beautifully. They've created new characters and molded situations to suit a live-action drama without compromising the essence of Hugh Howey's works. One reason for this is Hugh Howey's involvement in the script's development. The show's creator, Graham Yost, has detailed discussions with Howey about the story's direction, and it appears the duo came up with the idea of the syndrome together. Graham Yost said in an interview with SFX magazine that when he was discussing the construct of the series with Hugh Howey, they spoke about how unnatural a Silo was. Human beings weren't meant to live like this, he had said. This is where Yost and Howey had come up with the syndrome. According to Yost, the syndrome is a neurological response to the pressure of surviving in the locked-up underground conditions. It's a mental thing that converts into physical strain. In the case of Billings, we've seen his symptoms, such as hand quivers and muscle spasms, acting up with the stress of the Juliet situation. For an average citizen, the psychological load of living in a gloomy metallic drum under its oppressive power structure is bound to trigger the nerves. Considering the signboard and mechanical, though, this disorder can be broken down even further. It suggests that clean living is the only way to avoid this disorder. This could mean that the silo's environmental hazards, such as pollution and rusted metal exposure, could have something to do with it. This sign is also present way down in mechanical, where smelting and other metalwork could produce caustic fumes, and other pollutants would have a larger presence. So, the syndrome could be a bacterial infection, which explains how people may be getting infected with the ailment. Another plausible reason for the syndrome could be the lack of sun exposure inside the silo. Now, I know Meadows said it's not a vitamin deficiency, but silo folks get no sun at all, literally 0 units. That can cause serious vitamin D deficiency, which disrupts normal brain activity even on a regular day on Earth today. Patients suffering from neurological diseases such as Parkinson's often have a vitamin D deficiency as a precursor. The lack of sun could definitely be a factor that makes people prone to catching the syndrome, even if it's not directly a cause. Ultimately, we think the syndrome is caused by a cumulative effect of the unnatural living conditions within the silo. I mean, if human beings are forced into becoming burrowing animals for hundreds of years, something's gotta give. However, the syndrome doesn't appear to be contagious or hereditary. Billings often hugs and cuddles his daughter, and while he is sometimes worried whether she may have his disorder, she's shown no signs of it. Billings' wife often calms him by reminding him that the syndrome isn't passed from parent to child. The impact of the syndrome on Silo's society. Paul Billings is the case study through whose eyes we've been able to see how the syndrome can totally disrupt the life of a person in the silo. And we'll bet this disorder isn't there in the Silo series just as a side plot for Billings, but it will be utilized again. The silo rules and practices are all about control. In this subterranean society set up in less than decent conditions, control might be necessary to some extent for even a chance at survival. But the silo has taken this to an extreme level. It almost seems to mercilessly quash any form of questioning of the authority with its own brand of capital punishment, the cleaning. In this stiff law system, the diseased are hardly the cream of the crop that can expect a good quality of life. Well, as good as it gets in the silo anyways. Now, Paul Billings has been fighting to hide his illness his entire life. He knows that once the cat's out of the bag, his life is going to completely change. Ever since he's a kid, Paul has shown aptitude as a student and his steadfast loyalty to the pact. But when he grew up a little and discovered he had the syndrome, things changed. He became dedicated to hiding this weakness from everyone around him, terrified of what consequences the disorder could have on his career and life as a whole. When he was 17, another boy with the syndrome got to know that Paul suffered from it too. He tried to strike up a friendship with Paul over it. Paul socked him so hard that he knocked out a tooth before warning the guy never to speak of that to anyone again. Paul feared his syndrome being outed above all else, and he carried this old ball and chain his entire life, even now, when he's a father and a husband. Even with Judge Meadows saying it's all cool and she wants to remove the stigma associated with the disease, a systemic taint has been injected into the system since the silo was created, and we don't think that will be vanquished so easily. Paul's story is a testament to how deeply the stigma surrounding the syndrome affects the lives of the people who have it. There aren't many choices for a person suffering from the syndrome. You either seek help to avoid the impending nervous system blackout, but end up becoming a pariah in the society who cannot hope to work in most jobs or have a regular family, or you hide it, like Billings, and risk your life as you work to provide for your family, essentially waiting for the day that will bring your own disastrous conclusion. Charles Martin, the other man with the syndrome, resorted to stealing at one point, and this could have something to do with his inability to get a job or acceptance in society. There's no way to win a battle against the syndrome, and it doesn't feel like the authorities want to set up neurologically impaired people into less physically taxing jobs. Instead, it feels as if the silo is trying to weed out the weak. Is there a cure? Scientific or pseudo-scientific solutions? Well, there is a bit of a mystery surrounding the syndrome in the silo. It's clearly a disorder that has no cure. The doctors conduct tests on patients and try to manage the disorder. When Juliet approached Charles Martin to speak about Sam Marnes' murder, he was undergoing a set of tests on level 62. The doctors are trying to understand the syndrome, but how much they know about it at this point hasn't been revealed. The sign in mechanical suggests that people with the syndrome can get the help they need to mitigate a fatal nervous system collapse, but we will learn more details as Billings' story progresses and other characters with the disorder emerge. Billings' syndrome is sure to aggravate further without medical attention, and it'll be interesting to see how his health is salvaged, if at all. What's next? The syndrome in future seasons. Considering the amount of time the previous season took to build on the concept of the syndrome and then used it during a pivotal moment of the show when the police were trying to take Juliet in, it is almost certain that this subplot was not there just for Billings' character development. It'll likely play a larger role in the current and upcoming seasons. There has been some speculation about Solo's eyes, the man Juliet meets in Solo 17. Solo's eyes are each a different color, and many fans speculate that this noticeable heterochromia is a symptom of the syndrome. But we'll need more information to confirm this, as it isn't like any other syndrome symptoms we've seen so far. For all of Solo's isolation trauma, we don't think he looks like he has a neurological disorder, at least right off the bat. I have a feeling the worst of the syndrome is still to come. The Silo story needs that kind of internal danger, especially with its complicated but fascinating plot. Sure, the system's super strict and oppressive, but you could argue that the mayor and his shadow are just trying to stop people from heading out into a toxic world. The harsh rules and punishments? Probably just their way of keeping everyone in check and avoiding chaos. If another major character ends up with the syndrome, things could get really intense. It would add an emotional layer and raise the stakes with a serious threat brewing inside the silo itself. Marvelous verdict! As the stories of Silo 18 and Silo 17 intertwine, our main characters are in for even tougher times. Billings will face mounting pressure as he wrestles with what's right and what's wrong. If he sides with the rebels, the added stress will only worsen his condition, and we'll see him battle both the syndrome and his conscience. The syndrome isn't picky, it could hit anyone, especially with the silo's harsh environment. We're curious to see who's next to deal with this brutal illness, but for now, that's all we've got. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and subscribe, it really helps us out. Otherwise, this is Wizard Wheezy signing off for now. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.